Hey guys, how's it going? It's Delmer again and welcome back to my channel. So first of all, thank you very much for joining the channel. I really appreciate your time. And also, if you haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and subscribe because that's really going to help me in growing this community. And today I'm pretty excited because I'm actually going to walk you through creating a shader. I started learning shaders not too long ago and I was actually pretty afraid of creating shaders. And now that I'm using Shader Graph and I learned how to create shaders, it's actually not as hard as it used to be. So let's jump into Unity and start working on one shader. And then by the end of this video, you should be able to use that shader in any of your projects. All right, guys, so let me show you what we're gonna be doing. So I'm gonna open up Unity and we're gonna click on New to create a new project. And I already have the project name in my clipboard, so I'll just paste it, which is gonna be Unity Lightweight Rendering Pipeline Essentials. And the template that I'm going to choose for this is going to be the Lightweight Rendering Pipeline because I really want to show you how that works. And I'm going to leave everything else as it is. I already know that I want to put it in there, so then just click on Create Project. So with the Lightweight Rendering Pipeline, we're going to be able to use a couple of things. I'm going to use the pipeline itself, and I'm also going to use Shader Graph, which is what we're going to be using for creating the shader. So let's just wait until Unity creates the project. Looks like it's almost there and it should be opening right now. And now importing small assets. Okay, so it looks like the project got created and we're gonna get a welcome, a README file pretty much that tells us all about the lightweight rendering pipeline. I'm just going to ignore it for now and you can look at the scene if you like. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this to the default layout. And Unity has a really cool, basically a really cool scene that they had laid out for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually remove that. I don't want to use it for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete sample assets. And I want to delete the example assets as well from the hierarchy. And we're just going to use a very basic scene, just like this, with no assets in it. And we're also going to delete the tutorial info. The reason why I want to clean it up is because I'm going to be giving this to you via GitHub, and I don't want to have a lot of that extra stuff in it. So let's see. So we have our skybox material, we have presets, which is fine. We can leave those. The sample scene, the script, and then settings. That's perfect. We're going to use some of these settings for the lightweight rendering pipeline, and also we're going to use it so that our shader in our material looks a lot better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this scene, and instead of calling it sample scene, let's call it shader 1 because we're going to be having a lot of shaders. And then once we know what the shaders are going to be, we can rename them to be something more meaningful. So we should have a main camera here, we should have the directional light, and also the post-processing volume. So that's all good. And the next thing that I'm gonna do, now let's go into our camera. We don't have anything in the scene, so I'm just gonna click on Create Game Object. I'm gonna go into 3D Object and we're gonna add a sphere. And I'm just basically gonna hit F so that I can zoom in. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to select my main camera, Game Object, and Align with View. Excellent, so we should have everything that we need to get going. And I think I'm happy. Let's actually make it bigger. So let's go closer and we can align with view again. Perfect. Okay, so I think we got something to work with. I'm gonna close the extra stuff here that we don't need. I don't need the asset store. I'm going to have the scene there and the game, that's fine. Okay, perfect. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I want to update the lightweight rendering pipeline and also Shader Graph because they have a new version available, and that new version allows me to basically expose property through the shader so that we can change it to the inspector, and I want to show you that as well. So before we keep going, let's go to Window, and then we're going to go into the Package Manager and wait until everything gets loaded here. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Lightweight RP, and I'm going to update to version 4.10.0. You notice that we're 4.1.0, so that's a big update. Just going to hit update and just wait. It shouldn't take that long. And as soon as that is completed, we're gonna do the same thing with shader graph. And just to be safe, I'm gonna close the project and then reopen it, just so that everything loads. Okay, so that's importing the assets. And by the way, if you haven't used the package manager that Unity provides, this is where you can find a lot of those components that don't come with Unity out of the box. You can open it up and then you can see that there's a lot of things available. AirKit is available, FEX Exporter is available. These are some of the things that I've used in the past. The input system, jobs, and then Pro Builder, which is very popular, and also post-processing. Okay, so that's done. Now let's go in and update shader graph. So we're gonna go down to shader graph, and we can see that, let's see, oh, we actually haven't installed it, so let's just click on it to install it. And that was pretty fast. Okay, perfect. So the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna close the project. So let's just close it and then reopen it. I normally do that from time to time, especially when I'm installing something new. Then I'm just gonna click on the project that we created. And I think I hit Command S, which saved as the sample scene. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna delete that scene again, and we're just gonna hit delete, and then just double click on shader _1 so that we can go to that scene. Perfect. Now if I hit save, we should be okay. All right, so now we can start. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click on assets, create, and we're going to create a new folder. And this is where we're gonna put our shaders. So I'm just gonna call it shaders. We already have a materials folder, so that's perfect because we're gonna be putting the materials there. Excellent. So what we're gonna do in here is we're gonna create a shader that basically draws a line in the middle, and that line is gonna have a bloom and it's gonna look really cool. So let's right click on shaders, create, and then go into shader, and then we're gonna create a PBR graph, and this one is gonna be shader, we're just gonna call it shader _1, just like we did with the other one, with the scene. Perfect. So once you have that created, if you want to open shader graph, all you have to do is double click it, and that'll open shader graph for us. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically put it on the right hand side, and the other thing that I'll do is I'm gonna move the inspector to the left, and we can focus on those two areas. And if you click on the shader area, let me actually do that again. If you click on any of the empty area here and hit F, it's actually gonna basically zoom in and focus on the components that we need to focus on. Perfect. So we have that, and I don't see, let me go back to, I don't see our sphere. Looks like that went away. And looks like we have our example assets back. So I'm just gonna delete that, and we can just recreate the sphere very quickly here. So 3D object and then a sphere. And what I'm gonna do is go into the inspector and make sure that it is at 0, 0, 0, 0. I'm going to select my camera, and I'm going to go into, let's actually make the view so that it looks, there we go. So we have more real estate on the right hand side, and with my camera selected, I'm just gonna align with view. Perfect. So that works great. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna add a couple of components that are gonna allow us to change the emission values. So what I gotta do is, if you haven't looked at shader graph before, this is the first thing that opens up. You always get basically like a master node that has the position, it has the albedo value, which is gonna be a color value. And if I change this, if I go to the game view, and we change something in here, let's say that I change this to red, you have to hit save to save the shader. And we haven't associated the shader with that just yet, so let's do that right now. We're gonna go into materials, I'm gonna create a new material, and we're gonna call this one shader _1. Excellent. And let me go into my shader, and what I'll do is, let's actually drag and drop these two shaders so that I can easily assign the shader to that material. And now we can see that we have it associated, so I can drop it back into materials. And then I'll drag it and drop it into the sphere so that that material gets associated with the sphere. Excellent. So we have that, and you can see that if I make changes in here, say that I make it yellow, and then I hit save, see that that changes. You also get this really cool preview. So if I wanted to add, more of a metallic view, metallic look, I could do something like that, and then, that reflects or changes in the game view. Perfect. So let me go back and undo what I just did. I'm just gonna set this to 0. The smoothness, I'm gonna set it back to 0 as well. And I'm gonna set the object space to be, let's set it to black, something like that. Then if you right click anywhere in the empty area, you have multiple options. You can create a new node, you can code a node, you can copy a node, you can delete, duplicate, and so on. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just do create node, and I'm gonna look for a shape. So I'm gonna look for procedural and then shape, and we're gonna add a rectangle shape. And if you notice, if I change this node, you can see that that's changing the preview. And if I do the same thing with X, this one is doing the height. And then let me do that one more time. Rectangle. Can actually type it in as well. Perfect. And there we go. So this is for the width, and the one on the bottom is going to be for the height. And this one is going to be for the UV. And then the value coming out is what we're going to be connecting to the PBR master. Okay, excellent. So the next thing that I need to do is I want to modify the color of this. So let me save this right now so that I have the black, kind of like a black color in there. And I'm gonna change the X on the metallic a little bit, and let's add a little bit of smoothness because I can't really see what's happening in here. There we go. So now we have a little more depth around the sphere. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new node in here, and that node is going to be the color node. You can see that that's pretty straightforward. You can go here and change that color. So I'm just going to select the red color. So right now I don't have a way to, so right now I really don't have anything connected, and I could go in and say, okay, I want to change the emission to be, red, and everything is going to be changed to red, but that doesn't really help. Because all I want to do is I want to add a line that goes across, and then if I change the height of this, it's basically going to make it thicker. So let's actually delete that connection because that's not what I'm going to do here. So whenever you want to combine things together, let's say that I want the color of this and I also want the rectangle shape, you can use different nodes to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the multiply node to combine those two together. So if you do that and then you grab the out value from the color going into A on the multiply, you can see that that is changing automatically to red because that's the only thing that is going in. So, but if I want to combine what I have in here with the rectangle, so I can say, okay, that multiply, now it's going to be, the rectangle is going to be assigned to the multiply. You can see that now we can see, that is square, and it's also getting combined with the red, which is really, really cool. And if I change the width in here, which I'm going to change to a 1, actually go to 1.5, so we can go all the way across. Then I get this really cool effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign that effect to the sphere. So how do we do that? And that's what I'm going to do next. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use the out value that I have in here with the emission. So as soon as I do that and I hit save as, you can see that I can now modify. Let me actually go into scene mode, and I'm going to change the gizmo size because it's getting on the way. Let's make it smaller, something like that. And perfect. So now you can see that, I'm getting basically a line going across, which is the rectangle. So the other thing that I can do is if I wanted to change the height, let's say that I wanted to make that smaller, I can do something like that and then hit save asset. And now I have, a line going across, which is really, really cool. So that's great, but I want to be able to control a couple of things. I want to control the color from the inspector itself. So if I click on the sphere, so let me put the inspector right here on the bottom. So if I click on the sphere, and actually let me collapse everything here so that we can focus on that piece. And I'm gonna drag and drop the project into there, also the console in here, and we can focus on the hierarchy. Perfect. So what I want to be able to do is if I click on the sphere material, which is shader_1, I want to have a property in here that I can change. So if I want to change the color, I can do it through the inspector. I don't have to go through the shader and make those changes. The same thing with the height. If I want to change the height, I want to change it through the inspector and not through the shader itself. So how do we do that? So that's the next thing that I'm going to do. And if you look at these nodes, let me hit F one more time, and perfect. and I'm gonna hit save in here. So if I go here and I right click on the color, you can see that I have an option to convert to a property. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna convert this one to a property. And as soon as I convert it to a property, and you can see that it's now one of the properties. If I hit save, you can see that now I have a property called color. And if I go into it, let me see. Normally I see a node that has the names that I can, so that I can modify, but I'm not seeing that right now. Let me see, expand previews, because normally I see that information in here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just close that shader, and then we'll basically select it and go into the project. Let's go down to shaders, double click on the shader. Okay, I can see it now. For some reason it didn't show the properties that I was creating, and the reason why I want to do that is because I want to change the name. I don't want to use basically the pre-built name that it's using, which is in this case is color. So you can now see this node right here, which is what I was looking for. So if I hit F, now I should be able to see a preview. I should also be able to see all the different variables or properties, I think that's what they call it, in a list here. So the other thing that I can do here is if I wanted to call this something else, so right now it's called color, so I want to call it line color because that's what I'm gonna call it. And now that is called line color, and you can see that if I save the shader, that is actually now line color. I don't believe I can do, let me see, oh yeah, I can do a spaces, that's great. So now I can do a line color and I can make the changes. So what's cool about this is the shader is safe, and if I want to change the color of that, I can change the color. If I want to make it yellow, if I want to make it, that's getting saved without me having to save the shader, because that property is getting exposed to the inspector. Perfect. So now let's do one more thing. So I want to do the same thing, but I want to do it with a different type. And I could easily, do what I did here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click in this area, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, actually click on the plus symbol here, and then go into vector 1, and we're going to call this one line height. Perfect. And I think everything, and the other cool thing that I have in here is I can set this one to a slider, and we can say that the maximum, let's see what the maximum it's going to be. I think the maximum that's going to be around, around 1. So from 0 to 1 it's perfect. So you can set the minimum and also the maximum. So let me do that one more time. And so this one is going to be called line height. Excellent. And I'm going to change this one to a slider, and we're going to go from 0 to 1. Perfect. So basically you add it as a property here, and now if you want to associate it, all you have to do is drag and drop it into this area. Then it creates a new property, and then I can grab it with pressing and dragging on this point and associating that with height. So you can see that line when is very thin right now because the default value is 0. I could change that default value to something else if I wanted to. I'm gonna leave it at 0. I think that's completely fine. Perfect. And excellent. So now let's hit save, and we can see we have a little line, but it's really not. Now I can modify it through here. I can also change it in here. I can make it red, and so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it, let's make it red, and I'm gonna make this line just a little bit smaller. So that's cool, but that still doesn't really look too cool per se. And I'm gonna make some other changes so you can see how I'm able to get some really cool effects with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my camera again, and maybe that angle, I like that angle, I think that works well. Then what I'm going to change the projection on the camera. I really like how orthographic cameras look. And then what I'm going to do is, let me see here, I'm going to change the size. And the size is going to be right about there. I think that's too big. Let's go something like that, 1.5. I think works well. Excellent. And okay, perfect. So then the other thing that I want to do is, instead of using the skybox, and you're more than welcome to leave it in a skybox, I just want to make it look a little bit different. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be maybe a light maybe a kind of like a gray color works. Perfect. And I'm gonna zoom out just a tiny bit more. Excellent. And I think I'm happy. So far so good. So the next thing that I'll do is, I don't really like how much I have around like that white area. It doesn't really make it look cool. So this is what I do a lot, is I'm gonna go and I might tell you to do something one way, and because we're creating art, this is gonna take time, and I don't want to tell you that I know everything, because I really don't. I just, you know, I go with my gut, and what if it looks cool, then I go with that. And that's what I do in most of my games, is I go with, you know, my kind of artistic skill per se, and I'm happy with that. Okay, perfect. So that looks cool. So the other thing that I want to do is, I don't have a shadow, so I want to be able to see the shadow, because that makes it look cool too. So I'm going to go to Game Object, 3D Object, and I'm going to create a cube. In that cube, I'm going to position right beneath the sphere, and we can in fact go, so let's do this. I'm going to go there, and we're still not seeing the shadows. We'll look and see why that is the case. Alright, so I think I'm happy with the way that this looks now. So let's go into our light and change the lighting from being baked to real time, so that we can get some real-time shadows. And I think that looks great. And let me see, let me click on this guy. Perfect. Okay, so we're getting some shadows, and so let me put the game view here. And they're really hard to see, and I think that's because of some of the intensity values. Okay, there we go. And the shadows, I'm gonna go to my main camera. Oh, there we go. Just gotta modify the far value. I think I set it to be too low, so I'm just gonna do, let's do about 100. I think that works. The other thing that I don't like too much is the location of the shadow. So I'm gonna move the camera, sorry, the light. There we go. Something like that works. And now I'm gonna move the bottom of that a little bit more, which is gonna be, so this is actually gonna be called the ground. Excellent. And I think I'm happy with how that is positioned. So let's go back into the lighting, and let's see, the intensity of the light, I'm gonna set it to 1.6. The shadows, I think I'm fine with the shadows being soft shadows. The other thing that I'm gonna uncheck is the low resolution. I want this to look as good as we can. Okay, perfect, and I'm happy. Okay, happy with that. So now let's go into post-processing volume, and I'm gonna make some changes here. I'm gonna change the intensity. There we go, that's what I wanted. So that's kind of like what I wanna see. Then I think that's fine. Now let's go into projects, and I'm gonna create a new material. So this new material is gonna be for the ground, and I'm just gonna drag it and drop it into the ground. Now we can change that ground to be, there we go, something like that. Excellent. And let's change the order of this. Okay, perfect. And let me just toggle the lighting so that I don't get distracted. And I think I'm happy. I'm happy with that. Let me just tweak it a tiny bit more. Yeah, I think that works. Excellent. And okay, so I'm happy. Perfect. And that looks good. Okay. Perfect. So I'm still not 100% happy with the shader. So I'm gonna go back into the shader, and let's make some more changes to the smoothness and make it a little bit thinner. Okay, so that looks a little more cartoony. I'm gonna add it a little bit more. There we go, and maybe a little bit more. Okay, so I'm happy with that one. Then metallic. Let me see. Just change the metallic a little bit, move it up. Okay, just a tiny bit less, maybe 0.5. Okay, I like that much better. Okay, excellent. So now I have the bloom. So what I'm gonna do as well is on the vignetting. Let's change the vignetting. Let me just do something like, so I'm going to increase the roundness, and I just want to focus on, there we go, make it look really cool. And okay, I like that. I like the intensity of the bloom. Let me increase the bloom, maybe about there. Okay, so I'm happy what we have. We can in fact go into the sphere, and if I wanted to change this to be a small value, if I wanted to change it, yeah, that looks really cool. I'm gonna set it to be, let's see, 0.4 works. Let's actually do 0.45. Yeah, I like that. Okay, excellent. So the other thing that I'm gonna do is I want to rotate this as is running. So I have a script that I already wrote. So let me just pull that script that I have it from another project, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy that script from the Unity3d Essentials, Assets, and then Scripts, and then go into Rotator, and then I'm gonna copy it into Unity LW, and then as well Assets, and I believe I have a script folders. If I don't, I'll just put it under Assets, and then we'll move it out. So let me make sure that got copied, and we do have a script folder, so I could have just simply put it in the same location. So I'm just gonna drag it and drop it into Scripts. Perfect, and it's a fairly simple script. So if I open it up, you'll see it's basically just doing a rotate on time delta, and then it's doing the self on the rotation space. So that's all. Okay, now let's go back into Unity. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add it to the sphere. Just gonna collapse all of these so that we can see everything, and I'm gonna add the rotator. And if I add the rotator, I have a couple of values in here. So let me hit play and we'll see what looks cool with that. I believe I can do, when I tried last time, it was about 40, 50, and then 70. And maybe, let's see, let's try 60. Yeah, I like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy those values, and then I'll just paste them in that same component. Excellent. And then what I'll do, so this one I'm just gonna call sphere 1, then we'll just duplicate it. This is gonna be a sphere 2, and then we'll just reposition a sphere 2, and that one we can just put right on the back, and we can do just one more, maybe towards, there we go, maybe around that area. I'm just gonna move it a tiny bit more. This one, let's move it right there. Okay, right about there. This guy right about there, and we can go into our main camera. Just change the size a tiny bit. Okay, perfect. And maybe just one more change. Okay, perfect. So what I'm gonna do is a sphere. Let's see, this is gonna be a sphere 3. So one is gonna be in the middle. So let's rename this one. So this one is gonna be 2. This one is gonna be 1. So that we're doing them in order. So 1, it's the one on one end, and the other one is in the other end. So what I'm gonna do is 1 and 3. I'm gonna make him 0.5, 0.5, and then 0.5. So they're gonna be smaller spheres. And then I'm also gonna change the values so that we get some, some different rotations on those. And I think I'm happy with that. Let's see. Let me just, there we go. Just move the camera a tiny bit more. And perfect. Okay. So happy with that. And now let's just hit play. See what happens. And we're getting some really cool effects. Awesome. So now let's go into, for instance, we can go into the select all 3 spheres. Actually, you don't need to select 3 spheres because that same material is assigned to each one of them. It's basically the same shader. So what I can do is I can increase this value, I can lower the value, which gives it a really, really cool look. I can make it very thin, or I can make it bigger. So I'm gonna do something like that, and then I'm gonna show you that we can also change the color. So if you want to make it kind of like Tron-like. You can do something like that, which looks really cool. Excellent. And the other thing that I can also do is we can go back into our post-processing, and you can play with some of these values. I really have a lot of fun, you know, making changes to this. So if I wanted to change this to make it more old school, I could change the temperature. If I wanted to be, you know, give it a little more reflection on that blue color against the floor, I can change it as well. I can change the tint value. I can also change the exposure if I want it to be lighter or darker. So I'm gonna leave it like that, and I think I'm happy with those changes. And of course we can change the bloom intensity. If we want it to be super, you know, super strong, it's gonna leave it as what it is. And I think that's everything that I wanted to cover in this video, guys. If you guys have any questions, let me know, and look for this project in my GitHub profile, which I'm gonna be putting in the description of this video. And you should be able to look at the, you know, the shader that we created and also the structure that we created. So thank you very much, and don't forget to share this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.